Most people hear President of the United States and think power, not money. But what if I told you one president was so wealthy, his net worth was equal to what more than 1,800 average Americans would make in their entire lives? Another tried to pay off his massive debts by turning his mansion into a lottery prize. And one kept a giant wheel of cheese in the White House for 2 full years just because he could. These wasn't just commanders-in-chief. They were land barons, deal makers, billionaires before the title even existed. Some inherited fortunes. Others built empires from nothing. A few lost everything, then earned it back in ways history books almost never mention. And the craziest part? Their wealth didn't just shape their lives, it shaped the country. Let's count down the 5 richest presidents in U.S. history. But be warned, the list gets wilder the closer we get to number 1. Number 5. Andrew Jackson. $132 million estimated today. Andrew Jackson didn't start with wealth. He clawed his way into it. Orphaned as a teen, scarred by a British officer, he became a lawyer and built his fortune the old-fashioned way: land, slaves, and power. His estate, the Hermitage, began as a log cabin, but grew into a sprawling plantation with imported wallpaper, marble mantels, chandeliers, and over 300 enslaved workers, making him rich. Jackson loved money almost as much as he loved chaos. He fought in up to 100 duels. He beat down his own assassin with a cane. And when he won the presidency, he threw a White House party so wild, people tracked mud across the furniture while chugging whiskey punch. His enemies called him a jackass, so he turned the insult into the symbol of the Democratic Party. He wasn't polished, but he was powerful, wealthy, and feared. And the next president on this list was born even richer.
Number 4. Theodore Teddy Roosevelt. $139 million estimated today. Teddy Roosevelt didn't just step into wealth, he was born wrapped in it. His family ran successful businesses in glass, real estate, and imports, and by the time he was 22, he'd inherited what would equal more than $3 million today. But his life didn't stay cushy for long. His wife and mother died on the same day, and he bolted to the Dakota Badlands to become a cattle rancher. A brutal winter wiped out his herd and much of his money, but Roosevelt didn't stay down. He bounced back into politics, stacking high-paying roles: police commissioner, Navy secretary, governor, vice president, then president at just 42. He also wrote more than 25 best-selling books, adding even more to his fortune. He spent freely on travel, hunting expeditions, cattle, and his 22-room Long Island estate, Sagamore Hill. But the next name on this list didn't just inherit money, he spent it faster than he could make it. Number 3. Thomas Jefferson. $236.8 million estimated today. Thomas Jefferson was the definition of rich but reckless. Born into wealth, educated at William and Mary, and one of the highest-paid lawyers of his time, he built Monticello, one of the most expensive homes in early America. But the house wasn't his only investment. He owned around 600 enslaved people over his lifetime, including Sally Hemings, who bore 6 of his children. He spent fortunes on wine, furniture, art, travel, and books. So many books that when he was drowning in debt, he sold his entire collection to the government, creating the foundation of the Library of Congress. Even as his finances collapsed, he kept remodeling Monticello and buying French wine by the case. By the time he died, he was so deep in debt, he tried to auction off his estate through a lottery. Wealth followed him his whole life, but money management didn't. The next president, however, mastered both power and profit.
Number 2. George Washington. $587 million estimated today. George Washington didn't just lead a revolution, he profited from it. Born into a wealthy Virginia plantation family, he inherited Mount Vernon from his half-brother and expanded it into a 50,000-acre empire.
He owned more than 570 enslaved people and turned the property into a money machine. One surprise most people never hear about? Washington ran the largest whiskey distillery in America at the time, producing over 11 gallons a year. His presidential salary was $25,000, a full 2% of the entire U.S. budget. And when he wasn't running the country, he was expanding his land holdings, investing in frontier property, and building out dozens of massive outbuildings across his estate. Mount Vernon wasn't just a home. It was a self-contained luxury operation with gardens, salt rooms, orchards, wash houses, and smoke houses. Washington set the standard for power. But the number one spot on this list doesn't just beat him, it blows everyone else away. Number 1. Donald Trump. $2.1 billion estimated today. Donald Trump isn't just the richest president in U.S. history. He's worth nearly 4 times more than George Washington. Born into a real estate dynasty, Trump was earning the modern equivalent of $60,000 a year by the time he was 3. When he took over his father's company in his 20s, his net worth shot to $200 million in just a few years. He built skyscrapers, casinos, hotels, golf resorts, and turned his last name into a billion-dollar brand plastered on everything from planes to steaks. His penthouse in Trump Tower is coated in gold and marble and worth over $50 million alone. He owns aircraft, helicopters, mansions in New York, Beverly Hills, the Caribbean, and multiple properties near Mar-a-Lago. He outspent, outbuilt, and outbranded every president on this list. But here's the twist. Being the richest doesn't mean being the most secure. His fortune has risen and crashed more than once, and it might again.
Here's what most people never realize. Not all presidential fortunes survived history. Washington turned land and whiskey into generational wealth. Roosevelt inherited millions and added more through books and political power. Jackson bought luxury through brute force, law work, and plantations. Trump built a media empire on his last name and leveraged loans into billions. But Thomas Jefferson? He died nearly broke. His spending habits drained his estate so badly that his family auctioned off Monticello and everything in it just to cover his debts. Meanwhile, Washington's Mount Vernon still stands today, generating revenue and preserved as a national symbol of early American wealth. These men didn't just earn money, they reshaped how power and wealth connected to the presidency itself. But here's the real twist. Some of the richest presidents didn't get rich from politics at all. And one of the poorest presidents in history quietly became a millionaire after leaving office. A fortune isn't always clean, and some presidential wealth came from places history books like to skip. Washington, Jefferson, and Jackson built much of their net worth on slave labor, land, crops, and estates worked by people who had no freedom or pay. Jefferson's debt didn't stop him from buying wine and remodeling Monticello, but enslaved people were listed as assets to secure his loans. Jackson owned more than 300 people across his properties and profited from buying and selling them. Even Roosevelt's family wealth came from early American business networks tied to shipping and international trade that benefited from systems of exploitation. Trump's controversies were different. Bankrupt casinos, lawsuits, branding deals, and partnerships that collapsed or blew up in the news. Their wealth wasn't just about cash. It was about power, labor, image, and timing. But there's something even stranger. One president who wasn't born rich still found a way into the millionaire club. Not every president on this list was born into money, and not every rich president stayed rich. Andrew Jackson started with nothing. Orphaned young, wounded in war, and living in a log cabin, he used law and land speculation to climb his way into fortune. Trump inherited millions, but nearly lost everything more than once before rebuilding his empire. Jefferson inherited wealth, but died in debt so deep his mansion had to be liquidated. Even presidents not on this list, like Abraham Lincoln and Harry Truman, entered office with almost no money and left with barely more. But here's the twist. Modern presidents often make their fortunes after leaving the White House, through books, speeches, and business deals. One recent president went from nearly broke to earning more in 4 years after office than Washington made in his lifetime. So if these 5 were the richest in history, who's quietly catching up right now? The 5 richest presidents built their fortunes through plantations, inheritance, real estate, branding, and power. But the game has changed. Today, presidents don't need land or slaves or even skyscrapers to become wealthy. They have book deals, media contracts, foundations, speaking fees, and billionaires waiting to invest in their influence. Some former presidents have already made over $100 million after leaving office without owning a single mansion before their term. And with politics now tied to global business, streaming platforms, and private donors, the next richest president may not come from old family wealth at all. They might build it in front of cameras, behind corporate doors, or after just one term in power. Andrew Jackson fought duels for his honor. Roosevelt inherited privilege. Jefferson bought wine on debt. Trump sold his name. But the next one? Their fortune may already be growing, and they haven't even taken the oath yet.